Julian Hayes gazed out the viewport as the transport ship descended through swirling emerald clouds. Proxima's twin suns cast a golden glow across the alien landscape below, illuminating crystalline spires that stretched toward the sky like grasping fingers. "Ambassador, we'll be landing in 5 minutes," announced the pilot. Julian straightened his formal diplomatic attire and reviewed his mission briefing one last time. Earth desperately needed the rare minerals found only on Proxima, and the previous ambassador had failed spectacularly at securing mining rights. The pressure weighing on his shoulders felt heavier than the enhanced gravity of this alien world. The landing was smoother than expected. Julian took a deep breath before the airlock doors slid open, revealing a delegation of Proximans waiting on the platform. His breath caught in his throat. The briefings hadn't prepared him for their imposing presence. The Proximans stood nearly 8 feet tall, their slender bodies covered in a subtle iridescent sheen that shifted colors with their movements. Their features were humanoid enough to be familiar, yet undeniably alien: high cheekbones, elongated limbs, and eyes that seemed to hold the depths of the universe within them. "Ambassador Hayes," a melodious voice called out, "welcome to Proxima. I am Naira Thalasi, Senior Diplomatic Liaison." Julian looked way up to meet Naira's gaze. Her eyes were the color of amethysts, deep purple with flecks of silver that seemed to see right through him. Her midnight blue hair was elaborately braided with tiny crystalline beads that chimed softly when she moved. "Liaison Thalasi," he replied, extending his hand before remembering that Proximans preferred not to touch during initial meetings. He awkwardly withdrew it. "Thank you for your welcome. You appear fatigued from your journey," she observed, her tone polite but distant. "Perhaps we should postpone formal introductions until tomorrow?" Julian sensed her subtle dismissal and felt a flash of irritation. "I'm quite capable of proceeding today," he insisted, unwilling to show weakness. "The matters at hand are urgent." Naira's expression remained neutral, though he detected a hint of annoyance in her reply. "As you wish. The council awaits." The following hours were a blur of introductions and preliminary discussions. Julian struggled to focus as Naira presented the Proximan position with elegant precision. Her arguments were methodical, revealing an intellect that made him feel hopelessly outmatched. Each time she glanced his way, he felt diminished by her towering presence. By evening, exhaustion overwhelmed him. In his assigned quarters, designed for someone much taller, Julian collapsed into an oversized chair and stared out at the alien skyline. 6 months, he muttered to himself. 6 months trapped in negotiations with people who literally looked down on me. The thought of working closely with the intimidating liaison Thalasi made his stomach knot. How could he possibly represent humanity effectively against someone so perfect in her alienness? Little did Julian know that across the city, Naira was expressing similar frustrations to her assistant. "The human ambassador seems determined to maintain distance," she sighed. "How can we build a meaningful alliance when he flinches every time I move?" "Give him time," her assistant advised. "Humans are adaptable, if impatient." Under the light of 3 rising moons, 2 beings from different worlds contemplated the challenge ahead, unaware that their paths would soon intertwine in ways neither could imagine. 2 weeks into his assignment, Julian found himself no closer to breaking through the formal barriers with the Proximans. Each negotiation session ended with polite nods, but little progress. Liaison Thalasi remained professional yet distant, her elegant movements and articulate rebuttals leaving him both frustrated and fascinated. "You must attend tonight's Celestial Harmony Festival," insisted Trent, his human cultural attaché. "The Proximans consider it offensive if foreign dignitaries don't participate. It happens only once every 15 years when their 3 moons align." Julian sighed. More ceremonial obligations. It's not just ceremony to them. It's spiritually significant, and an excellent opportunity to see the Proximans as people rather than negotiation opponents. That evening, Julian followed crowds of Proximans to a vast amphitheater carved from crystal. The three moons, one amber, one pale blue, and one silver, were slowly converging in the night sky, casting an ethereal light over everything. As ceremonial music began, Julian noticed Naira sitting among Proximan officials, her usual formal attire replaced by flowing garments that shimmered with the changing moonlight. For once, she looked relaxed, even joyful. The festival proceeded with various performances, but as the moons reached perfect alignment, the crowd hushed. Several Proximans moved to the center stage. To Julian's surprise, Naira rose and joined them. "What's happening?" he whispered to Trent. "The lunar dance. It's performed by those who've mastered the ancient art forms. I had no idea liaison fallacy was among them." As haunting melody filled the air, Naira moved with grace that belied her height. Her dance told a story of longing and hope that transcended language. Julian found himself transfixed, seeing for the first time the person behind the diplomatic mask in the glow of the three moons. Tears glistened on her cheeks as she danced. A moment of raw emotion he was certain he wasn't meant to witness. When the music faded, Naira's eyes briefly met his across the crowd. Julian felt something shift between them, a mutual recognition that extended beyond their official roles. After the ceremony, he found himself wandering the crystal gardens, processing what he'd seen. "Ambassador Hayes," Naira's voice startled him. "Liaison fallacy. Your performance was extraordinary." She looked away, a purple flush coloring her cheeks. "You weren't supposed to see that side of me." "Why not? It complicates things." She gestured vaguely toward the diplomatic quarters. "Tomorrow we return to being representatives of our worlds." "Does it have to be so separate?" Julian asked. "Perhaps understanding each other as individuals might help our negotiations." Naira studied him with those penetrating violet eyes. "Perhaps," she finally conceded. "Would you join me tomorrow evening? I could show you how we view your world through our astronomical archives." For the first time since his arrival, Julian smiled genuinely. "I'd like that very much." The next evening marked the beginning of something neither had anticipated. Their astronomical discussion extended far beyond the planned hour, evolving into conversations about poetry, philosophy, and personal dreams. In the following weeks, these private meetings became a refuge from the still tense negotiations. Julian found himself counting the hours until he could hear Naira Lafa, melodious sound that transformed her serious demeanor entirely. "Hidden feelings. You're holding it incorrectly," Naira observed, amusement dancing in her eyes as Julian struggled with a Proximan writing instrument. "It's designed for fingers twice the length of mine," he protested, but he was laughing too. A month had passed since the festival, and their relationship had transformed. What began as professional courtesy had evolved into cultural exchange, sessions that often extended well beyond their scheduled time. Today, Naira was attempting to teach him Proximan calligraphy in her private study. "Here," she said, reaching to adjust his grip, her fingers long, elegant, and warm-brushed against his, sending an unexpected current through him. She paused, seemingly equally affected by the contact, before gently positioning his hand. "Like this." The formal negotiations remained challenging, but these private moments revealed a different dynamic. Naira was witty and curious about Earth, asking questions about everything from human music to family structures. In turn, Julian found himself captivated by her perspective on the universe. "Your species rushes everywhere," she noted one evening as they shared tea on her balcony overlooking the crystalline city, "always running toward the next moment rather than experiencing the present one. And your people could occasionally benefit from a little urgency," he countered with a smile. "The trade agreement that was supposed to take a month is now approaching its third." Naira's expression grew serious. Some things cannot be rushed, Julian. She hesitated before adding, understanding between different worlds requires patience. He realized she'd used his first name, something that had never happened in council chambers. The intimacy of it warmed him more than the spiced Proximan tea in his hands. Later that night, walking back to his quarters, Julian found himself taking a detour through the gardens where they'd spoken after the festival. The memory of Naira dancing beneath the 3 moons returned vividly. He stopped suddenly, struck by a realization that both thrilled and terrified him. He was falling in love with her. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh aloud. A human ambassador, falling for an 8-foot-tall alien diplomat? It seemed like a cosmic joke. Yet when she'd adjusted his hand today, when their eyes had met over evening tea, he'd felt something reciprocal in her gaze, connection that defied the light years between their home worlds and the physical differences of their forms. A relationship between them would face opposition from both worlds. Humans had only recently begun interspecies diplomacy. Romantic entanglements were unprecedented and likely to be seen as compromising. And the Proximans, would they see such an attachment as beneath someone of Naira's standing? Meanwhile, across the city, Naira stood on her balcony, troubled by emotions she had never experienced. The human ambassador, Julian, had somehow bypassed every barrier she had constructed. His determination, his quick mind, his willingness to learn her ways, all had captured her attention in ways she hadn't anticipated. "It's impossible," she whispered to the night sky. "We come from different worlds, different biologies, different destinies." Yet she found herself replaying every moment they'd shared, analyzing each smile, each accidental touch. Tomorrow they would meet again, ostensibly to discuss cultural approaches to conflict resolution. But Naira knew she was running out of official pretexts for their meetings. As the smallest moon set behind the crystal spires, both beings from distant stars contemplated the same impossible question. How do you tell someone from another world that they've captured your heart? Ambassador Hayes must be recalled immediately. The holographic projection of Earth's Secretary of Interplanetary Affairs loomed large in the secure communication chamber. His personal involvement with the alien diplomat compromises the entire mission. Julian stood rigid, his face expressionless, despite the hurricane of emotions within. "With respect, Secretary, my relationship with Liaison Thalasi has improved our negotiating position. We've made more progress in the past month than in the previous year. We've received concerning reports about the nature of this relationship," the Secretary continued, disapproval evident in her tone. "Romantic entanglements with non-human species are strictly prohibited under Diplomatic Code 47B. Julian's hands clenched at his sides. "Who I spend time with outside of negotiations is very much our business when it involves the first potential interspecies treaty in human history." The Secretary's voice rose sharply. "You have a choice, Hayes. End this inappropriate liaison and focus solely on the mineral rights agreement, or we'll replace you with someone who understands professional boundaries." The transmission ended, leaving Julian alone with the impossible decision. How could he possibly choose between his duty to humanity and his feelings for Naira? Across the city in the Proximan High Council chamber, Naira faced similar scrutiny. "Your involvement with the human threatens the purity of our diplomatic traditions." Elder Valen's resonant voice filled the chamber. "The council has voted. You are to be removed from your position and replaced with Liaison Zereth." Naira stood tall despite the crushing weight of the council's judgment. "The human ambassador understands our people better than any previous Earth representative. Removing me now jeopardizes the treaty. Perhaps you should have considered that before allowing personal sentiments to cloud your judgment." Elder Valen replied coldly. That evening, Julian waited in their usual meeting spot in the Crystal Gardens, unaware of Naira's situation. When she finally arrived, her usual luminescence seemed dimmed. "Julian," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I cannot continue our meetings." The words struck him like a physical blow. "Your council?" She nodded, violet eyes glistening. "And your government?" "The same," he admitted. "They're threatening to recall me." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and impossible yearnings. "So this is where it ends," Julian finally said, bitterness seeping into his voice. "Politics and prejudice winning again." "It's not just politics," Naira countered. "Our worlds aren't ready for what we represent." "And what exactly is that?" Julian challenged, stepping closer. "The possibility that differences don't have to divide us," she answered, her voice breaking. "That connection can transcend biology, transcend stars." Julian reached for her hand, no longer caring about diplomatic protocols. "Then shouldn't we fight for that possibility? Isn't that worth defying both our worlds for?" Before she could answer, an urgent communication chimed on both their devices simultaneously. Julian checked his, face paling at the message. "There's been an attack on the mining survey team," he said urgently. "Both humans and Proximans injured." Naira's eyes widened in alarm. "Who would do this?" "Someone who doesn't want our worlds to find common ground," Julian realized. "We need to go there together before this escalates into something that can't be fixed." As they hurried toward the emergency transport, a plan began forming in Julian's mind. Perhaps this crisis would provide not just a challenge, but an opportunity, a chance to prove that what existed between them could benefit both their peoples. Worlds bridged the aftermath of the attack, created chaos in the diplomatic corps of both species. Julian and Naira arrived at the mining site to find injured personnel from both worlds receiving emergency treatment. Rather than separation in the crisis, medical teams had integrated, with human doctors and Proximan healers working side by side to save lives. "See how they don't question working together when it matters?" Julian murmured to Naira as they surveyed the scene. Investigation revealed the attack had been orchestrated by a coalition of extremists from both worlds, who feared the alliance. Their plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of driving the species apart, the shared threat had united them in purpose. Julian and Naira worked tirelessly through the night, coordinating rescue efforts and securing the area. Their seamless collaboration drew notice from officials on both sides. "I've never seen a human and Proximan work so effectively together," remarked one of the elders who had arrived to assess the situation. When dawn broke over the horizon, Julian pulled Naira aside. "I have an idea, a way to save the treaty and possibly us. But it's risky." Hours later, they stood before a joint session of Earth representatives and the Proximan High Council. The chamber buzzed with tension after the previous night's violence. "Honorable delegates," Julian began. "What happened yesterday was an attempt to prevent what frightens some among us, genuine connection between our worlds. But in crisis, we witness the truth. Our differences aren't barriers, but complementary strengths." Naira stepped forward. "The attack failed because it underestimated what becomes possible when we truly collaborate. Ambassador Hayes and I propose a new approach to our negotiations." They unveiled their proposal, a joint mining operation with shared technology and mutual benefits far beyond the original treaty's scope. More importantly, they proposed establishing a permanent cultural exchange program, with themselves as the first official ambassadors. "Our personal connection," Julian said boldly, addressing the unspoken issue directly, has enabled breakthroughs that months of formal negotiation couldn't achieve. We propose to make this connection official, not just between us, but between our worlds. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Earth Secretary's hologram flickered with obvious disapproval. "Ambassador Hayes, are you suggesting we condone interspecies relationships as diplomatic policy?" "I'm suggesting," Julian replied steadily, that we recognize when something works, regardless of our preconceptions. Naira's voice joined his, strong and clear. Our worlds stand at a crossroads. We can retreat into fear of difference, or we can embrace the possibilities of connection. An unexpected voice broke the tense silence. I witnessed their coordination during the crisis, said Elder Valen. It was ... remarkable. After hours of heated debate, a compromise emerged. The joint mining operation was approved, along with the cultural exchange program. Julian and Naira would oversee both initiatives, their personal relationship neither officially sanctioned nor forbidden, but tacitly accepted as a diplomatic asset. That night, alone together on Naira's balcony beneath the 3 moons, Julian finally gave voice to what had remained unspoken for too long. I love you, he said simply, no longer laughing at the idea, but embracing its beautiful truth. Naira's eyes shimmered with emotion as she spoke his name, not his title, but his name, with such tenderness that it brought tears to his eyes. Julian, she whispered, her voice carrying all the answers he needed. As their hands, intertwined different in form, but perfectly complementary, they knew their journey was just beginning. Between the stars, between species, between worlds once separated by vast distances of understanding, they had built a bridge strong enough to carry them forward together.